Since the reinstatement of the capital punishment in California, 13 people have been executed. Robert Alton Harris, April 21, 1992. Two teenage boys were abducted by Robert Alton Harris and his brother, Daniel Marcus Harris, who was also a co-defendant. After savagely killing the boys, Robert took their car. According to the investigation, on July 5, 1978, at 10:30 a.m., Robert and Daniel drove from their home to a fast food restaurant. After arriving at the restaurant, the two guys kidnapped Michael Baker and John Majewski, two 16-year-old boys. Robert pushed the victims to drive till they arrived at a remote location while brandishing a pistol at them. Daniel Harris followed in the 1963 Ford owned by his brother. Robert shot and killed both victims in front of Daniel Harris at approximately 11:45 a.m. The Harris brothers drove both cars to their home after the killings. They took the stolen car to a nearby bank later that day. The two robbed the bank and walked away with $2,000 in cash while wearing colorful ski masks. At 2:30 p.m., the Harrises left the bank and went back to their home. The stolen car was parked in the garage by Robert Harris. The brothers were taken into custody by San Diego police officers at approximately 1:05 p.m. after they received a tip from a witness who had followed the suspect's car to the home. Robert Harris had 20 unfired 9mm bullets found by the police. He was found guilty on March 6, 1979 in San Diego County Superior Court of 2 counts of first-degree murder with exceptional circumstances and kidnapping. His brother, Daniel Marcus Harris, the co-defendant, was found guilty of kidnapping and given a 6-year prison sentence by the state. He was freed in 1983. The first execution in California in 25 years took place on April 21, 1992, when Robert Alton Harris was put to death in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison. Harris asked for and received 2 huge pizzas, a bucket of fried chicken, and ice cream for his final meal. He was led into the gas chamber at 6:01 a.m. He was declared dead at 6:21 a.m. after the execution order was given at 6:07 a.m. Harris's last words were, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." David Edwin Mason, August 24, 1993. In 9 months, Mason essayed, assaulted, and strangled 4 elderly victims. Mason killed his cellmate while he was being held in the county jail pending trial. He was also wanted in Butte County for killing his male lover with a gunshot wound as the victim was sleeping. I couldn't find the name of the victims, but this is what happened to them. The first victim was a female, 73 years old. She was a longtime friend of Mason's. She had hired him for odd chores, shown him around her apartment, and even shown him the panic buttons on her alarm system. Using his position of trust, Mason broke into her home on March 6, 1980, choked her when she tried to set off the alarm, stole from her, tied her up, battered, and strangled her till she passed away. Victim number 2 was a male, 75 years old. Mason robbed, battered, and strangled the victim, whom he could have known before, on August 18, 1980. Victim number 3 was a woman, 72 years old. On November 11, 1980, Mason hit the woman over the head with a crescent wrench and strangled her. She had cuts and bruises around her private areas. Victim number 4, a female victim, 75 years old. Mason essayed, battered, and strangled her on December 6, 1980. The victim's body was covered in wounds and bruises. A portion of her garments were torn off. Victim number 5, an Alameda County Jail male cellmate. On May 9, 1982, Mason beat and strangled his cellmate to death with a knotted towel, assisted by another prisoner. In an attempt to make the murder appear to be a suicide, he then hanged the victim from a hefty shower rod. Mason confessed to the crimes, but then retracted his statement, saying he only confessed because he was so depressed about his lover's murder. He was the prime suspect for that man's death as well. Mason requested permission from the court in March 1993 to replace his attorney and to stop having appeals filed on his behalf. To ascertain if he was mentally capable of making an informed decision, the court mandated a hearing. Following the judge's consideration of the testimony of psychiatrists designated by the court, Mason won. After the matter was brought back before the Alameda County Superior Court in June of 1993, Mason requested that the execution date be set for August 24, 1993, and the court granted his request. Mason was put to death in the San Quentin State Prison gas chamber on August 24, 1993. He was the first prisoner on a death sentence to voluntarily give up his federal appeal rights. The planned time of execution was 12:01 a.m. A federal court called the prison 2 minutes before midnight to make sure Mason's lawyer was there in case he wanted to halt the proceedings. Mason was led onto the chamber around 12:05 a.m. His lawyer was in the witness area, so Warden Daniel Vasquez showed up in the chamber at 12:08 a.m. and asked Mason if he had changed his mind and wanted to end the proceedings. Mason answered, "No, Warden, I want to proceed. Thank you, Warden." The deadly gas was injected into the chamber at 12:09 in the morning. At 12:23 a.m., Mason was pronounced deceased. On his final day, he spent time with his relatives. Approximately at 6 o'clock in the evening, he was led to the death watch cell. Mason was allowed to talk to his family members on the phone for as long as he wanted. While confined to the death watch cell, Mason declined any final meal and asked only for ice water. He did not have any final words. William George Bonin, February 23, 1996. Between 1979 and 1980, a total of 14 young boys were abducted, robbed, essayed, and murdered by William George Bonin, also known as the Freeway Killer. The young boys who were his co-defendants ranged in age from 17 to 21. In 1982, Bonin received a death sentence for 10 murders that occurred in Los Angeles County. He was given a second death sentence after being found guilty in Orange County of the remaining 4 killings. In addition, Bonin was suspected of killing other men whose remains were discovered in Kern, Riverside, San Diego, and San Bernardino counties at roughly the same time. He was not prosecuted for those offenses. On February 23, 1996, Bonin was put to death in the San Quentin State Prison execution chamber. He was the first prisoner in California to be executed by lethal injection. At 12:09 a.m., Warden Arthur Calderon issued the order to start the execution, and at 12:13 a.m., Bonin was declared dead. On his final day, he got to see some friends. It was almost 6 o'clock when he was led into the death watch cell. In his final dinner, he ordered 3 pints of coffee ice cream, 2 large pepperoni and sausage pizzas, and 3 six-packs of regular Coca-Cola. He gave the following last words to Warden Calderon: "That I feel the death penalty is not an answer to the problems at hand. That I feel it sends the wrong message to the youth of the country. Young people act as they see other people acting instead of as people tell them to act. And I would suggest that when a person has a thought of doing anything serious against the law, that before they did, that they should go to a quiet place and think about it seriously." Keith Daniel Williams, May 3, 1996. On October 9, 1978, Miguel and Salvador Vargas, the victims, were discovered face down on the floor of their rural Merced home. Both had been shot in the back of the head. Lourdes Meza's body was found in a field a short distance from the house 5 days later. She had suffered 4 gunshot wounds and was also assayed. According to the investigation, the 3 victims had attended a rummage sale at the residence of Robert Leslie Tyson, the co-defendant, and his wife, Karen Tyson, 2 days prior. There they saw Keith Daniel Williams as well. Williams made a $1,500 offer to purchase Miguel Vargas' vehicle during the event. Williams agreed to hold off on getting the pink slip until the check had cleared the bank after filling out a personal check. Karen Tyson, the co-defendant's wife, claims that after the victims had departed, Williams started saying that he should have murdered them. The following day, Williams reportedly carried on talking about the Mexicans, promising to blow them away and take back the check, according to Mrs. Tyson. He added that he would need her husband as cover. Around 4 p.m. on Sunday, October 8, according to Mrs. Tyson, Williams and her husband departed for the victim's residence in Merced. Sometime about 9 p.m., Williams and Tyson arrived at the Vargas residence, where they were met by the uncle of the two male victims, Mr. Leon Macias. According to Mr. Macias, he and his nephews, Lourdes Meza, his daughter and her partner, and the two men gathered around the dining table to talk about the car's sale. After a while, Salvador went upstairs to bed while his daughter and her companion departed. After translating for Miguel until 9:30 p.m., Mr. Macias departed, promising to come back the next morning and accompany Miguel to cash the check. Macias went back the following morning at 9 a.m. and nobody answered the door. He didn't look into it. Later, he came to the Vargas residence and discovered his nephews dead after discovering that Miguel had not shown up for work the night before. Lourdes Meza was also missing. Subsequently, investigators discovered that she had been abducted and had been essayed multiple times prior to being shot. For his role in the crimes, Robert Leslie Tyson was given 3 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life. Williams was put to death in the San Quentin State Prison execution chamber on May 3, 1996. He was the second prisoner in California to be put to death via lethal injection. Just after 11:45 p.m., witnesses were led into the witness area. They watched as IVs were inserted into Williams's arms. Warden Alter Calderon gave the order to start the execution at 12:03 p.m. on May 3rd. Williams passed away at 12:08 that morning. He saw his lawyers and spiritual advisor on his final day. Fried pork chops, a baked potato with real butter, asparagus, a salad dressed with blue cheese, apple pie, and whole milk comprised his last meal. He didn't have any final words. Thomas Martin Thompson, July 14, 1998. On September 14, 1981, farm workers in a rural Irvine, Orange County region found Ginger Lorraine Fleischle's body in a shallow grave. The body was wrapped in a pink blanket and a sleeping bag and tied with a rope. 5 knife stab wounds had been discovered in and around Ginger's ear during an essay. She had her jacket, 2 towels, a sheet, and duct tape wrapped around her head. Her ankles and wrists were cut. Thomas Martin Thompson, the perpetrator, and his accomplice David William Leitch were connected to the murder by the investigators. Thompson was found guilty of first-degree murder of killing someone while committing SA. On August 17, 1984, Orange County sentenced him to death. On July 19, 1985, crime partner David Leitch was found guilty of second-degree murder and given a 15-year-to-life sentence. 16 years and 10 months after he essayed and killed the woman on July 13, 1998, at 11:48 p.m., Thomas Thompson was led into the execution chamber at San Quentin. At 11:54 p.m., the cell door was closed and the catheter used to administer the fatal injection was placed into his arm. The drapes opened a minute after the media witness entered at 11:58 p.m. On July 14, the execution by lethal injection started at 12:01 a.m. 5 minutes later, at 12:06 a.m., Thompson was declared dead. His last meal included Alaskan king crab with melted butter, spinach salad, pork fried rice, Mandarin-style spare ribs, hot fudge sundae, and a 6-pack of Coca-Cola. Following the execution, Warden Art Calderon read Thompson's last statement. For 17 years, the AG has been pursuing the wrong man. In time, he will come to know this. I don't want anyone to avenge my death. Instead, I want you to stop killing people. God bless. Jaturun Siripongs, February 9, 1999. Siripongs was found guilty of robbery, burglary, and 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with Pakovan Pat Watanporn and Quach Nguyen's killings on December 15, 1981. On April 22, 1983, an Orange County jury sentenced Siripongs to death. In a cellar of Watanaporn's modest retail establishment, Pentai Market, in Garden Grove, California, the remains of Watanaporn and Nguyen were discovered. Mrs. Watanaporn had died from strangulation. The store employee Nguyen sustained multiple stab wounds to his neck, hands, and right arm, in addition to defensive wounds. A rope bound around his right arm was also discovered by the police. It was estimated that both passed away at about 12:30 p.m. Police discovered bloodstains all throughout the shop. When authorities investigated the dumpster the next day, they discovered bloody cord similar to the one tied around Nguyen's arm and bloodstained clothes. When Siripongs attempted to make transactions with the Watanaporn's credit cards on December 17, he was taken into custody. Following a blood examination, it was discovered that Siripongs' blood type was compatible with many bloodstains discovered at the murder site, the bloodstained garments and the bloody cord. His fingers were slashed multiple times. At occasions, Siripongs was working at the Pantai market. When the police searched his home and car, they found many pieces of Mrs. Watanaporn's jewelry, department store receipt for purchases made after Mrs. Watanaporn was killed, and the knife set identical to the one used to kill Nguyen. In Siripongs' vehicle, authorities also discovered dried blood. Siripong, who was a former Buddhist monk, was executed by injection at San Quentin. While Siripongs acknowledged his involvement in the theft, he maintained that the killings were carried out by an accomplice, whom he would not identify. He gained some strange allies during his 16 years incarcerated. He was described by guards as always courteous and cooperative, and former San Quentin State Prison warden Daniel Vasquez, who oversaw 2 executions and was an ardent supporter of the death penalty, recommended clemency on the grounds that it would serve as positive role model for other prisoners. When the curtain of the beige death cell opened, he did not mutter any final words. He did not shake his fist or kick his legs either. He didn't even open his eyes. Furthermore, he died more slowly than any previous California death row convict who received the fatal injection for an unknown reason. His last meal consisted of 2 cans of Lucky Arctic iced tea and 2 cups of Mission Pride canned peaches. Manuel P. Babbitt, May 4, 1999. Babbitt broke into Lea Schendl's South Sacramento residence on the evening of December 18 and 19, 1980, assaulted and severely abused the 78-year-old. Before plundering and robbing Mrs. Schendl's home, he also made an attempt to assay her. The semi-naked body of Mrs. Schendl was discovered partially covered in a blood-stained mattress on the bedroom floor. Her cause of death was heart failure, and it was brought on by stress from the beating and robbery. He tried to assay another woman in Sacramento the next night, December 19, 1980, and beat her until she passed out before robbing her of cash and jewelry. He claimed he had no memories of the events after his arrest, although he did not refute committing the acts. Nonetheless, he was connected to Mrs. Schendl's murder, as a number of her belongings were discovered in his possession. He was convicted of first-degree murder with exceptional circumstances by a jury in Sacramento County. On July 6, 1982, he received a death sentence. He was given the Purple Heart in March of 1998 while incarcerated on death row due to injuries he sustained 30 years earlier in the Vietnam War. Babbitt was put to death by lethal injection in the execution chamber of San Quentin State Prison on May 4, 1999 at 12:29 a.m. At 12:37 a.m., Babbitt was pronounced deceased. He refused to eat one last time and fasted until the point of his death. His final hours were spent with his attorneys, family, and friends. In his final words, Manuel P. Babbitt said, "I forgive all of you." Darrell Keith Rich, March 15, 2000. 4 counts of first-degree murder were found against Darrell Keith Rich in connection with the July-August 1978 killings of Annette Faye Edwards, Patricia Ann Moore, Linda Diane Slavic, and Annette Lynn Selix. Rich was condemned to death on January 23, 1981 by a Yolo County jury after 3 of these convictions were under unusual circumstances. Rich tried to assay Redding resident Annette Faye Edwards, 19 years old, but she was beaten with a rock instead. Multiple head injuries claimed her life. He drove 17-year-old Patricia Ann Moore to a secluded location where she was assayed and later crushed to death with a rock. Rich drove 26-year-old Linda Diane Slavic from Chico to his Cottonwood home. There, she was assayed before being taken to a secluded location and shot to death. Patricia Ann Moore was killed at the same isolated spot, and Linda Diane Slavic was shown Patricia Ann Moore's lifeless body just before she was killed. Rich drove 11-year-old Annette Lynn Selix to his Cottonwood home, where he essayed her in multiple ways. Then, after traveling 30 miles, he threw her 105 feet to the rocks below the Johns Creek Bridge. 3 days before his arrest, on August 20, 1978, he informed the body that he had come upon a dead body. Police officers were notified, and they started questioning Rich. He took a polygraph and didn't pass. Because of this, officials assumed he was more informed about the remains than he was disclosing. A few days later, Rich started bragging to friends that he had really been paid $7,000 to kill one of the women. He said she was in the wrong location at the wrong time when asked about the other body. Along with giving the officers his gun, he also offered them comprehensive information on the offenses. Darrell Keith Rich was put to death by lethal injection in the execution chamber of San Quentin State Prison on March 15, 2000 at 12:06 a.m. At 12:13 a.m., Rich was pronounced deceased. Until his execution, he refused the final meal and sipped on tea, broth, and Gatorade. He spent the last hours of his life with his lawyers and spiritual counselors. His final word was peace. Robert Lee Massie, March 27, 2001. For the killings of Boris G. Naumoff on January 3, 1979, Massie was found guilty on 1 count of first-degree murder. On May 25, 1979, a jury in San Francisco County sentenced him to death. During a liquor store heist, he shot and killed Naumoff while injuring Charles Harris, another employee. This crime took place while Massie was serving his parole for a 1965 murder in Los Angeles County. For that crime, he had been awarded the death punishment. However, in 1972, the California Supreme Court declared that the death penalty was unconstitutional. A witness claims that when she went into a San Francisco liquor store in the afternoon of January 3, 1979, to make a purchase, she observed Massie behind the counter talking face-to-face with the liquor store's owner, Naumoff. Believing that Massie was a client, the witness approached him and greeted Naumoff. Then Naumoff gave Massie some cash, which he stuffed in his jacket pocket. Chuck Harris, a store employee, entered at that point and started talking to Naumoff as he made his way to the back area. Naumoff followed Massie around the counter as he turned to leave. In the aisle, the two men began to fight. Then Massie opened fire many times. One killed Naumoff by striking him in the neck, while another injured Harris in his right leg. The witness, who had ducked behind the counter when the shots were fired, was able to call the police even though Massie managed to get away. The following evening at 9:50 p.m., Massie was taken into custody by San Francisco police while driving his vehicle. They discovered a fully loaded gun on Massie. They also found multiple ammunition boxes and a loaded automatic gun with the hammer cocked in a fireable position inside his coat. Massie acknowledged that he had committed the acts while under the influence of alcohol or other controlled substances. He was put to death by lethal injection in the execution chamber of San Quentin State Prison on March 27, 2001 at 12:20 a.m. At 12:33, Massie was pronounced deceased. His last meal included 2 vanilla milkshakes, extra crispy French fries, extra crispy fried oysters, and soft drinks. He spent his last hours with his spiritual advisor and his attorneys. Robert Lee Massie's last words were, "Forgiveness, giving up all hope for a better past." Stephen Wayne Anderson, January 29, 2002. Following Elizabeth Lyman's death on May 26, 1980, Anderson was found guilty on 1 count of first-degree murder with exceptional circumstances and 1 count of house burglary. On July 24, 1981, a jury in San Bernardino County sentenced him to death. Retired piano instructor Elizabeth Lyman, 81, lived alone in Bloomington, San Bernardino County. On Monday, May 26, 1980, an hour after midnight, Anderson, a 26-year-old prison escapee from Utah State Prison, broke into her house and, thinking no one was home, severed her telephone connection with a knife. She woke up in her bed, startling him. As she lay in bed, he fired his handgun 8 to 20 inches away, striking her in the face. After that, Anderson draped a blanket over her body, found the hollow point bullet casing that had ejected from her body, and destroyed her home to steal money. Less than $100 was what he discovered. Next, Anderson had a noodle and egg dinner in Mrs. Lyman's kitchen. However, a suspicious neighbor who had been awakened by barking dogs and had spotted Anderson in Mrs. Lyman's house through a window alerted sheriff's deputies to the site, interrupting his meal. At 3:47 a.m., the deputies took Anderson into custody and transported him to the San Bernardino Sheriff's Substation located in Fontana. Anderson was an escaped prisoner from Utah State Prison when Mrs. Lyman passed away. He was imprisoned for 1 count of aggravated burglary in 1971 and 3 counts of aggravated burglary in 1973 before making his escape on November 24, 1979. Anderson killed 1 prisoner, assaulted another, and attacked a guard while he was housed at the Utah State Prison. In addition, Anderson acknowledged having participated in 6 more contract killings in Las Vegas, Nevada, before the one for which he was executed. Stephen Wayne Anderson was put to death by lethal injection in the execution chamber of San Quentin State Prison on January 29, 2002 at 12:18 a.m. At 12:30, he was declared dead. His last meal consisted of 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, 1 pint of cottage cheese, hominy corn mixture, 1 piece of peach pie, 1 pint of chocolate chip ice cream, and radishes. He had no last words. Donald J. Beardslee, January 19, 2005. Following the suspected drug-related murder of 2 young women, Patty Gedling and Stacy Benjamin, on April 25, 1981, Donald Beardslee was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was on parole in Missouri at the time of the killings for another murder conviction. Beardslee was executed by lethal injection on January 19, 2005. He was pronounced dead at 12:29 a.m. There were no last words. He had not received a family visit in at least a month and had made the decision to have none of his relatives witness the execution. He declined the final meal, choosing instead to sip grapefruit juice. About 300 protesters held vigil outside the jail compound, which is located approximately 25 miles north of San Francisco. Stanley Tookie Williams, December 13, 2005. Williams was traveling in one car with a companion on Wednesday, February 28, 1979, at approximately 4 in the morning. The co-defendant was also in the car with them. They planned to rob a store because they were almost out of gas. All 4 of them went inside the 7-Eleven located on Whittier Boulevard in Whittier as they came to a stop. Albert Lewis Owens, the victim, was an attendant sweeping the parking lot when he was dragged into the store by Williams and one of his friends. Williams led the victim into the back room, told him to get on his knees, and then shot him twice in the back with a shotgun as one of the companions emptied the cash register drawer and stole $120. Williams and another man broke down the door and went inside the Brookhaven Motel on South Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles on Sunday, March 11, 1979, at approximately 5:30 a.m. Tsai She-Young, 67, his wife Yen Yang, 63, and their daughter Ye Chen-Lin, 43, were all shot and killed. He departed after taking roughly $50 in cash. Stanley Williams was executed by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison on December 13, 2005. He was pronounced dead at 12:35 a.m. There were no last words. Williams did not request a last meal, but did drink milk in the few hours before his execution. Clarence Ray Allen, January 17, 2006. In 1974, Clarence Ray Allen enlisted the help of 2 men he employed as security guards to plan and carry out a break-in at Friends Market in Fresno, California. Additionally, Allen set up Mary Sue Kitts, a young lady, to assist in obtaining the store's burglar alarm and keys from Brian Schletowitz, the market owner's son. At the incident, Kitts informed Schletowitz that Allen was the one who had robbed the market after the orders for stolen money were cashed. When Schletowitz confronted Allen's son, he refuted the claims, as did Allen. Allen orchestrated Kitts' demise after declaring that the young lady would require some sort of action. Allen was taken into custody. On March 16, 1978, he was found guilty of burglary, first-degree murder, and conspiracy. He was given a life term in jail. He knew Billy Ray Hamilton while he was a prisoner at Folsom State Prison. Allen had plans to assassinate those who had turned against him and sentenced him to prison while he was incarcerated. 3 days following his release from prison, Allen's son picked up Hamilton at the bus station, where he also requested guns to complete the crimes. Joe Rios sold meat at Fran's Market to Hamilton and his girlfriend Connie Barbeau on September 4, 1980. Douglas White and Rios headed into the storage together. The front door was locked because it was after the market closed. Hamilton pursued Brian Schletowitz and Josephine Rocha into the storeroom while brandishing a sawed-off shotgun. Barbeau trailed closely behind. They were told to lie down by Hamilton. Everybody took a seat. Douglas White was led to the freezer by Hamilton after he was told to get up. White informed Hamilton that there was no safe in the freezer when they went inside. White and the other staffers went back to the warehouse. Then Hamilton asked Schletowitz for the safe's keys. Schletowitz handed him the keys. With an order to leave, Hamilton instructed Barbeau to keep an eye on the others. She pulled out a pistol. They proceeded to the safe. Hamilton was informed by Schletowitz that he would get all the money. Later, Rios testified that he heard shuffling and a bang when Schletowitz and Hamilton arrived at the safe area. Later on, it was discovered that Hamilton had fired the shotgun at Schletowitz at close range. Returning to the room, Hamilton asked Douglas White where the safes were stored. Since White had no knowledge, Hamilton shot him in the chest and stomach at close range. There was a subsequent report of another shot fired at close range, which led to Josephine Rocha's death. Rios shielded his face with his left arm from Hamilton's attempt to kill him. The explosion broke his elbow and blew off most of the tissue in his arm. Barbeau and Hamilton made sure the other 3 victims were dead by checking on them. Later, Hamilton was taken into custody on suspicion of participating in a robbery and violent attack in Modesto. One of his belongings was an address book bearing Clarence Ray Allen's name. Investigators thought there was a connection between the killings and the Fran's Market burglary, for which Allen had been found guilty because of the listing of Fran's Market and the names of some of the victims. Clarence Ray Allen, the prisoner, was taken into custody as a result of the inquiry into this case. On December 2, 1982, Allen was placed on California's execution row at San Quentin State Prison after being found guilty on 3 charges of first-degree murder with exceptional circumstances. Clarence Ray Allen was executed by lethal injection on January 17, 2006 at 12:20 a.m. He was pronounced dead at 12:38 a.m. Allen's last meal was buffalo steak, Kentucky Fried Chicken, all white meat, fried bread, pecan pie, black walnut ice cream, and whole milk. Allen issued the following statement. First of all, I'd like to say how good the last meal was, how much I enjoyed it, and how much I love my family and friends who have stood by me all these years. I'd also like to thank my friends from Europe who have written to me and my spiritual advisor, Richard Williams, one lady, Henny Rip from Holland, and another lady from Italy, Christine Kaufman, who I gave an Indian name of Morning Sun, and she's been that to me, and all of the inmates on death row that I'm leaving behind, that they will be joining me one day. One good friend I've got that I hate to leave behind, who's been my neighbor for 20 years, is Ward Weaver. And all of my family that was here to visit me during this period. I love you very much for being with me during this time. My last words will be, Hoka hey, it's a good day to die. Thank you very much. I love you all. Goodbye. Several members of the family of Josephine Rocha witnessed the execution of Clarence Ray Allen. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.